Thank you very much for this opportunity. Welcome, everybody. And my speech is essentially divided into parts. In the first one, the more extended one, I will focus on opinion, which is a quite wide, broad term in Aquinas speech. It can define a position held by someone else, but its main meaning on which I will focus is that of a cognitive habit or else an act of this habit. And in particular, I will explain an evolution that is present in St. Thomas' thought on this habit. So for now, I cannot define it because the change, also partly masked by the similar language, is so significant that giving a unified definition is impossible. The only thing that I can assert in general that is an habit dealing with contingent knowledge and not with necessary knowledge as scientia, demonstrative knowledge is. Whereas in the last part, I will focus a bit on the issue of probability, probabilitas in Latin, because it's a notion strictly connected with that of opinion, because opinion is based on probable arguments, and probability is the characteristic of the propositions held by opinion, and even more of the premises used to arrive at opinion. As I've already anticipated, there is a big change between the early works of St. Thomas and the mature ones, but it is not so easy to discover it because there is not a systematic treatment of this issue in St. Thomas. He was mainly a theologian, and indeed the main loci in which we find his doctrine on opinion is in the comparison in the studying faith that is usually compared in his main theological works with other cognitive habits in order to understand properly what is faith. And opinion always appears in this comparison, already in the Scriptum, super Sententias, then the questions by the Veritate, in the commentary on Boetium de Trinitate, and later on we have to go to the Secunda Secundae to have the same setting. Other loci in which Aquinas deals with opinion are the Aristotelian commentaries. Here there is no more the comparison with faith, but with other cognitive habits, in particular scientia, but not exclusively. And in particular, I will focus on some contents from the Sententia Ethicorum and Expositio libri Posteriorum Analyticorum. And already the titles that I've mentioned show clearly that there is a gap between the two blocks that I will consider, because we have some works coming from the first Parisian teaching. They're including also when St. Thomas was a bachelor, not already a master, and the others come from his second Parisian teaching, or even the period in Naples after Paris. So there is a huge gap in between. He sometimes dealt again with opinion also in between, for instance, in the Sententia libri de anima, but it does not touch the points which show is a change of mind, and so we'll skip these parts. The essential point is that the picture we get in the early works is that opinion is a quite weak cognitive habit. It's not characterized by a true assent, and but it's the direct fruit only of the intellect. There is no part of the will in its formation, as St. Thomas says, as we will see going into the texts. Whereas, and it's also interesting to consider that in the comparison of these cognitive habits and their degree of assent, that is always developed in the context of how the human reason assents or not in front of the contradiction of the two sides of a contradiction. And in these cases, we always see that there is a sort of hierarchy. We have dubitatio in which there is no assent to any of the two parts because equal weight of arguments for them hold. Although in the Scriptum there is also a scientia that is similar, but when we have no argument for any of the two. Then in the early works we have directly Opinio, which is some sort of assent, some adherence to one of the two sides, but cum formidine alterius, with fear of the other. This expression is a classical one that will recur throughout Thomas' work on this theme, but it is not original of St. Thomas. Obviously, it is already present in Avicenna, in Avicenna Latinus, obviously, not not the Arabic expression. But this fear is not an emotion. It just means that one thinks that it's possible that the other alternative holds. And then above it there is fate, that in the early treatments it comprehends both natural and supernatural at this stage, only after Thomas differentiates between them, in which there is a strong adherence to one of the two sides, ordered by the will, not by the strength of the arguments. And then there are scientia and intellectus, in which all in their different ways, the intellect is determined by its subject and necessarily holds what it holds. This is the picture that we find throughout all the early works. Whereas in the Summa, in the Secunda Secundae, we will find that there is, in between dubitatio and Opinio, there appears suspicio, suspect, that will be similar to the original Opinio, so far it is an inclination towards one of the two sides, and Opinio will become a stronger form of adherence to the chosen side, and moreover, there is an explicit role of the will in performing this assent, which was denied in the Veritate. And in order to see this picture in more detail, I'll go through some of the texts that you have in the handout, starting from the Scriptum. Here we find have removed some of the parts, precisely differentiating this first text from the comment on the third book of the sentences, distinction 23, question 2, article 2, question 1, precisely in this context of defining what is faith and what it means to believe. And there is the removed part, all the discussion about the intellectus, scientia, and then he goes on saying, quando vero ratio que movet ad alteram partem, neque sufficit ad intellectum terminandum, qui non resolvit conclusiones in principio per se nota, neque sufficit ad voluntatem terminandum, ut bonum videatur illi parte adere, which are respectively the case of scientia and the case of fides, also natural fides, tunc homo opinato illud qui aderet, et non terminato intellectus ad unum, quia sempre remanet motus contrarium, accipit enim unam partem cum formidine alterius, et ideo opinans non assentit. And some lines later he says, opinans autem habet cogitationis in assensu perfectus, sed habet aliquid assensus in quanto aderet in uni magis cum alii. And is exactly what I've explained before. It's not a strong assent, it's something that, some weak form of assent, because there is no possibility for the intellect to be satisfied by its proper object, nor to the will to say, well, it is good to assent fully to this object. And it's also interesting the following quotation again from the same locus of the Scriptum, but a pair of questions after, in answer in which it again differentiates between fides, scientia, and Opinio. And we have to have in mind that the background of this answer is a famous saying by Hugo of St. Victor, according to which fides is in between Opinio and scientia, for a certainty, and as St. Thomas says, certitudo animum scientia consistit in duobus, scita in evidentia et firmitatis adhesionis. Certitudo in fide consistit in uno tantum, scita in firmitatis adhesionis. certitudo vero opinionis in neutro, quam certitudo fidei de qual quimur, that is supernatural faith in this case, quantum ad illudunum sit vehementia, quam certitudo scientia quanto illa duo. Vel dicendum, quod loquitur de fide, questi est opinio firma trationibus, non autem de fide infusa. And we again say we see this difference in opinion. There is no form of certainty, not the sound of the assent, nor the evidence of the intellectual content. And we see also, especially he said that there is a natural faith that is a superior form of opinion, that is opinio firma trationibus, opinion strengthened by reasons, that by arguments, that is remains in between opinio simpliciter and scientia. Moving on to the questions despite Veritate, that very closely in time, very close in time to the Scriptum, we see essentially the same picture. And yeah, we are in question 14, article 1, which is about, again, what is faith, about the meaning of the verb to believe, and the question de fide. And again, St. Thomas gives the same idea. Intellectus possibilis non moetur nisi ad uobus, scilicet for objecto, quae sum intelligibilis, et a voluntatio moetur mensales vives. Sic intellectus nostra possibilis respect supratio contradictionis habet diversimode. So we have a different relation of the intellect with the content, because it can be moved either from the object or that is the intelligible form, or by the will. But again, after having explained the case of scientia, we get that quandoque intellectus inclinatum magis ad unum cum ad alterum, sed tamen illud inclinas non sufficientem moet intellectum ad hoc determinit ipsum in unam partium totaliter, unde accipit quidem unam partem, semper tamen dubia de opposita, et ec est dispois opinantis, qui accipit unam partem contradictionis cum formidine alterius. Again, we see that this is a condition of opines that takes one side with the fear of the other, and because the arguments are insufficient to move the intellect to a full adhesion to one of the two sides. And again, the same concept is expressed with different words. Some lines after, simiteris and opinions habitat sensum, cum non fiam metodius acceptus circalteram partem. And this is plain because sententia est conceptu distinta vel strectissima, alterius partis contradictionis assentiatum a sententia dicitur. And so there is no assent because assent requires certitude, which is not present in the case of faith, and on the case of opinion. I'm sorry. And the same is repeated with different words later on in the same article, and subsequent article deals with definition of faith. It said, però quod fides dicitur argumentum distinguitur ab opinione et dubitatione, in quibus mens non arguitur, id est non determinatur ad aliquid unum. Again, the opinion is similar to doubt, because the mind is not determined to assent to one of the two sides. And we have, although what was already present in the text of the Scriptum is even more explicitly said in the following text, which comes from the subsequent article, Article 3, in answer to an argument, the fact that in opinion there is no role of the will, because in order to exclude that there are virtues different from faith, that in scientia vel'opinione non est aliqua inclinatio ex voluntatis, sed ex ratione tantum. Se autum lecuremo deis quanto id quod est cognitionis tantum, sic nec opinio nec fides est virtus, cum habeant completa cognitionem, sentantum modo scientia. So here St. Thomas is saying that opinion is cannot be considered a virtue, a moral virtue, because there is no role of the will in its formation, but it's also not an intellectual virtue, because it's not a certain form of knowledge, and so it lacks any possibility to be seen as a virtue. And again, also in the commentary on the Trinitate, the picture continues to be the same. We are again dealing with the notion of faith in the third question, Article 1, and it says, fides habet aliquid commune cum opinione, et aliquid cum scientia et intellectu. Cum scientia siquidem intellectu comune habet certum et fixum assensum, in quab opinione differet, quae accipit altum contrariorum conformidine alterius, et dubitatione qui fluctuat inter duo contraria, sed cum opinione comune habet quod esse rebus, quae non sunt intellectu apparentia, in quod differet a scientia intellectu. And we start again. In Opinio, there is not a certain a fixed assent. There is always this formidine alterius, and it is what is not manifest to the intellect, non sunt intellectu apparentia, that is not the object of the demonstrated science, nor the quiddity that is directly grasped by the intellect. But answering to one of the objections, he explains how this form of assent of opinio holds. Indeed, quando comunque accepti salicum ad assentitur, operates esse aliquid quod inclinit ad assensum, sicut aliquid verisimilitudines in hoc quod assentimus isque opinamur, qui si fuerint aliquantum fratiores inclinitant credendum pot fides dicitur opinia iurat rationibus. And again, see this fact that opinio comes only from something that is very similar, and therefore it's a weak form of assent, but it will sufficient something more, and something more because aliquantum fratiores is just to say that a bit more strong arguments were sufficient to give a greater assent, that of belief, but of natural belief, that is the faith as opinio iurat rationibus. And but we remain in the same setting. Maybe it's reduced. St. Thomas starts to reduce the difference between opinio and opinio iurat rationibus, with this saying only aliquantulum fratiores for the arguments in favor of the second. And the last text that I've selected from the commentary on the Trinitate is instead in a part in which St. Thomas is dealing with the logic, its parts, and the role in science, in which he gives the same fact that it's from something very similar, but he introduced the expression probabilis. Also, this I've taken. Indeed, it says, "Quandoque inquisitio rationis non potetus quod predictum terminum," that is a demonstration, a perfect demonstration coming back to the first principles, "perducis et sissitur in ipsa inquisitione, quando scilicet inquirente ad documentum veritum libet, et hoc contingit quando per probabilis rationes proceitur, quenati sunt facie opinionem vel fidem non scientiam." And again, we see that opinio and natural faith are somehow put on a similar level, and they come from probable reasons that we will come back on what they mean, but we see that in the different parts, St. Thomas uses verisimilitudines and probabilis rationes as interchangeable. And here we have concluded the early vision of St. Thomas on opinion, this assent, or rather of not perfect assent, but aliquid assensus only. And we had to skip more than 10 years of his career to see him coming back to similar issues. And in the Secunda Secundae, in the Sententia Ethicorum, and in the Expositio libri Posteriorum. And I think that he was already, still thinking on this, because there are some differences between these three texts, although they are more or less of the same period, of the same years, but there are some small differences between them. So he was refining this point in his thinking, and this suggests that it's precisely this more strict, more close reading of Aristotle that moved him to change his vision and improve the role, increase the role of opinion and its cognitive value. And in the Sententia Ethicorum, the first thing that we see is a first differentiation between opinion and suspicio. That, as I said, is the first case in which he considers suspicio as a cognitive habit, because in his early works he used this term only in with other meanings, especially in the context, in juridical contexts, and as suspect that some can be culpable. There was only an occurrence of this a reference to suspicio and opinio together, but was only in a set contra, which refers to this locus of the Sententia Ethicorum, but remained there without any explanation. Not obviously also the Sententia Ethicorum of the Aristotelics, obviously. Was the authority that I referred. I'm sorry for that, this mistake. He's commenting on a passage in which Aristotle says that there are 5 intellectual virtues, and in the Latin translation, opinione et suspicione opinion and suspicion do not belong to them because they can be also false. And St. Thomas explains in this way, dictum est fius quod virtuti intellectualis sunt habitus quibus anima dicit verum. Sunt autem quinque, can skip it, above matem numero excluit, obviously the subject is Aristotle, obviously, suspicionem, quae per aliquas conjecturas abetur deliquibus particularibus factis, et opinionem, quae per probabilis rationes abetur deliquibus universalibus. Quam visenim per ista duo quandoque indicator, tamen contingit codeis quandoque dicitur falsum, quae malum intellectus, ictureum est bonum psius. Est statum contra sedetutis ut vincius maliactus. Therefore, again, he says that in opinion there can be falsity, but there's this first differentiation from suspect. Here he says that opinion is about universals and suspicio is about particulars, but he will not hold this, and is also in contradiction with some other loci of the same Sententia libri Ethicorum, in which he gives a wider scope to opinion, not restricting it to universals. For instance, in the same 6th book, but in the successive lecture, he says that opinio animes circaque contingent Savarese jurisprudentia, and is refers to particulars because Prudence deals with particulars or application of universal particulars. And also before, in the 3rd book, lecture 6, where he was comparing opinio with the lexio, following again. So he says that opinio potest esse circa omnia non minus circa necessitatem impossibilia, quam circa questunt impressa nostra. Again, also particulars are involved here, so that distinction between opinion and suspicion seems only a tentative one that cannot be held. And in fact, as we will say in both the Secunda Secundae and in the commentary on the Posteriorum Analytics, this will not be the point. An interesting part of this differentiation between opinion and the lexio is the last one, because St. Thomas starts to hint to a role of the volitional dimension in the formation of opinion, because he says that opinio cum pertinet ad cognoscitivem per si loquendo praetet lectionem, quae pertinet ad appetitivem, quae movetur cognoscitiva. Per accidens tamen contingit quandoque quod opinio sequitur lectionem, puta cum aliquis ex affectu eum quae legit mutat opinionem, quam pius habebat. So, in saying that elexio per accidens can precede opinio, he acknowledges also the will and the appetite can have some role in establishing what is the opinion of a person. But we can really say that here St. Thomas is moving on from the position which is not full assent in opinion, also looking at the last text that I've selected from the Sententia libri Ethicorum, book 6, lecture 8. Here is differentiating opinion from ebulia, this moral virtue, in which he says that licet aenia opiniam non certus, tamen iam determinait se ad unum. What the disappointment that he denied previously, that the opinions is determined at one single thing, to one of the positions, and insists after some lines, omne illude quabetur opinio iam est determinatum quantum ad opinantem, licet non sit determinatum quantum ad veritatem, in hoc ebulia deficit opinione, e contrario autem opinione est inquisitio, sed quedam enunciatio opinati, opiniam senim dicit verum esse quod opinatur. And yes, so fiercely, he didn't deny that who opines things that is true what he says, but he said that it was not determined to this one position. So this seems to mean that already Opinio is a stronger form of assent from the early works. Moving to the Secunda Secundae, we find a setting more familiar to that of the early texts. It's really a locus parallelus, but there are some changes. The language partly comes back to the first one of inclination, but in the first question, Article 4, again locus abus fate, says assentit aliquo intellecto duplicite, uno modo documento ex objecto, alio modo intellecto assentit alicui non quia sufficiente amoveato objecto proprio, sed per quando electione voluntae declinans in non partem magis cominaliam, e si quidem ac fit cum dubitazione familia se partis erit opinio, siatum fit cum certitudine apsicare familia e fides. And here we say the speaker's assertion that is a choice of the will to opine something that clearly does not mean that one is free to opine whatever he wants, in which we can be helped by locus that I have not reported from the Sententia libri de anima, in which he differentiates opinion from fantasia. The point is just that yes, we need some reasons in order to assent to the opinion, but these are not sufficient to move the intellect, but they're sufficient so that the will says that it is good to assent to it because it is, as we will see also from successive theses, almost certain, it's quite certainly also not fully certain true, and maybe either, as we'll see, the best sort of truth that we can have in the context of really contingent things, or it is something that help us to go towards demonstrating knowledge in case in which object is necessary. And moving to in the successive question, Article 1, we have the disappearance of suspicio in our hierarchy of cognitive habits. And with actum anima intellectum pertinentium, quidam abem firmam ascensione, masculinale cogitazione, sicut quale considera quiscitur intelligit, quidam veractus intellectus habent, quidam cogitationem firmam firma ascensione, sive in neotam partem declinent, sicut acci dubitanti, sive in unam partem magis declinent settentu aliquole visigno, sicut acci suspicanti, and here we have a suspect as this intermediate habit, sive unipartia deveant tamen cum formidine alterius, sicut acci opinanti. Sed actus isse quis crede habet firma lesione usum partem, cum scientia intelligente, tamen eius cognition est perfecto, e magis visione, cum dubitante, suspicante, et opinante. And here we see this great change of the appearance of suspicious aspect in between doubt and faith. And there's an inclination due to some weak sign, whereas opinion, as it preserves its formidine alterius, but is a stronger form of adhesion to one of the two sides. And this becomes even more clear in the Expositio libri Posteriorum Analyticorum, especially in the Foemium. Here, St. Thomas is explaining what are the different parts of logic, and also presents a parallel between human reason and the operations of human reason, that of nature. And it says that I'll skip the beginning. Secunda autem versionis processui, that is reservit alia pars logica, qui dicivo inventiva, nam inventium sempre est cum certitudine. Sicut adem verbus naturalibus, in isque ut in pluribus agunt gradus quidam attenditur, per quanto virtus natura est first, et tanto eos deficit a perfectu, itet in processu rationis, qui non est cum nimo da certitudine, gradus aliquis invenitur, secundum quod magis et minus ad perfectam certitudine ceditur. Per ius modi in processum, quandoque quid metium fiat scientia fit tamen fides vel opinio propter probabilitatem propositionum ex quibus proceditur, quia ratio totaliter declinat in unum partem contradictionis, licet cum formidine alterius, et ad hoc ordinator topica se dialectica, quando occorreva non fit comprese fides vel opinio, se suspicio quedam, che non totaliter declinator ad unum partem contradictionis, licet magis inclinetur in ancom in illam, et ad hoc ordinator rhetorica. And there we see the change of mind of St. Thomas completed. He says that in the case of faith, in the case of fides vel opinion, it is not so clear if he is using the two terms as synonymous, obviously speaking of natural faith, not supernatural one, or if they are just saying that they share this feature, but there remains a difference in degree between them, because it just says fides vel opinion. They will not come back on fides throughout the Expositio, libri Posteriorum, will only speak of opinion. This part cannot be solved, but species says also there is not full certainty. It is a sort of a cognition that reaches root ut pluribus, that only sometimes fails, only really fails, and it is there is a thought ratio title declinat in one pattern, so the intellect is fully inclined towards the side to which it stands, and this reference to reaching truth in pluribus leads us back to the last text I put of the Secunda Secundae, because it allows us to interpret it as referred to Opinio, although it was not mentioned there. And here St. Thomas said that secundum philosophum in Ethicorum Ethicorum est initer quendam in materia. As we know, this is due to an error of the Latin translation of Aristotle. He spoke of precision, acribeia, not of certainty, but the Latin scholastics took it with the translation error, and so if there were different sort of certainties. And in actibus animum humanis super quibus constituunto iudice exeguntur testimonium, non potest sapere certitudo demonstrativa, e così contingency trabili, et io sufficit probabilis certitudo, qui ut in pluribus veritatem attingat, et in potioribus veritare deficiat. So here St. Thomas puts this special kind of certainty, probabilis certitudos, probable certainty, as what can be attained about contingent and verbal things, in particular human actions, and this seems to be the sort of certainty that is attained by opinion, which is the highest of the cognitive habits dealing with contingent matter. And coming back to the Expositio di Posteriorum, indeed, there St. Thomas explains. I'm going a bit long. So in the Institute of Probability. So I do not read this last part, but I will just say that here St. Thomas explains that Opinio is about continuous, but either about what is really contingent or about what is taken as contingent by the knower. This is the sort of object about which there is a probabilis certitudo, and the other sort of object is what is real, that taken only by the knower is per se the object of science, but or one sometimes does not reach full science, and is probably what he has in mind when he's speaking of opinion. This answer to an argument from the Tertia Pars of the Summa Theologiae, where he says that Opinio est via scientiam per demonstrazione acquivitur, and also calling not only the probable arguments as a way towards the demonstrations, as he did in the Scriptum, in the commandment, in the Super Boetium de Trinitate, but saying that Opinio is a way towards science, seems to intend that also in this matter, as also in necessary matters, but known as contingent, Opinio in most cases reaches truth, and so is a valuable cognitive habit, and only rarely it's prone to error. As we have seen also in this last text, he makes reference to signa probabilia as what is the sort of argument used in order to get opinion, and this allows to pass to the conclusive part about probability according to St. Thomas. But to say that this is an argument on which St. Thomas says does not say much about this notion. It remains a bit confused because, there are some definitions, as those that I've selected here. One in the Expositio libri Analyticorum, in which it says that probabilia autem dicuntur quesunt magis nota vel sapientibus vel pluribus, et sic directus syllogismus procedis ex isque sunt magis novis nota. And it is to note that in another lecture of the same libri Analyticorum, he calls maxima opinabilia eque sunt evidentur et pluribus maximi sapientibus, and so it seems to what is maximally opinable and what is probable to be the same thing. And this definition of probabilia comes clearly from Aristotle, is an abbreviated form of Aristotelian endoxon. Is that what appears to be true to all, or to the multitude, or to the wise, and among them either all, or the greatest number of them, or the most wise. But although St. Thomas never uses the full definition, it's clearly what he's thinking about. And such a notion of probability would not be fitting from many of his uses, and it's also quite far from the later developments, both in the scholastic tradition and outside it, because it's not something that admits really of degrees, which will be quite common to say that something is more probable, less probable, etc. And if this were the whole notion of St. Thomas, we could say that his notion was just abandoned. There. But there is various textual evidence that it is not all what he has to say about it, or all what he thinks about probability. Indeed, in the commentary on another Aristotelian work, the Charlotte Mundo, he says, he gives a different notion of probability. It says, cum enica aliqua volumus summe rationabiliter ed est probabiliter absque demonstratione, tale proactet onere, que vidimus esse vera in omnibus aut in multis, okay, in est probabilis. And this is completely different. It's not what seems to be true to a certain group, but it also seems to be true in all cases, or in most cases, which moves from the subject to the object of the knowledge in question. And this seems to be somehow a proto-frequentist view of probability, if we want to use the modern array of interpretations of probability. Looking at the frequencies in which something is probable, it appears frequently within the set of reference of this thing. So the difference between these two texts suggests that Thomas never gave the full definition of what he means by probabilis or with probabilitas, and this is also confirmed by many uses that I didn't certain them out, but it's easy to find within St. Thomas' text assertions like that, showing that a certain principle is false removes all the probability of the arguments based on it. And this seems to point out to a certain intrinsic probability of arguments, as it will be called in the later scholastic tradition, many centuries after St. Thomas' death. And also, for instance, in the Summa Contingentilis, he qualifies the arguments in favor of the of creation in time of the eternity world reachable through natural reason as probable arguments. And this also because say there is some probability that seems not to refer to the authority of who proposed them in the context, but to a real internal strength of the arguments, but not sufficient to be considered demonstrations. And moreover, in this sense of intrinsic probability, is according to me particularly clear in a locus of the questis putata spiritualibus creaturis, in which St. Thomas, dealing with the issue whether bodies are inanimate, the celestial bodies are inanimate or animate, says that both opinions have the ratione probabilitatis, some feature, some character of probability, and then in order to explain this assertion, he goes on to examine the arguments in favor of them, not the wise that would defend the one or the other proposition. He previously said that there were significant both philosophers and fathers of the church who held both the positions, but then when it deals with the ratione probabilitatis, it goes into the rational arguments, and this seems to incline to a notion of intrinsic probability as strength of arguments. Although St. Thomas does not never say it, but he uses it in this sense. And furthermore, he also uses degrees of probability, which seem more fitting for this vision of probability as something based on the strength of argument, because the more the argument is strong, the more that it's probable, and vice versa. And we can find 23 uses of probabilior in order to qualify an opinion, an argument, a position within Aquinas' works. Also, this use is more frequent, honestly, in the recent works, as it will be for the next terms that I will mention, but he continues to use it also in the mature ones. And the same also expression as probabilius, so that verbal correspondent of probabilior, that more probably, and also a strange variant magis probabile. The two used together, removing quotations of other authors. We have 61 uses of these two together, and in a single occasion, he also used the expression minus probabile. And all this seems to mean that Aquinas had in mind a really wider notion of probability than the one expressed in those two partial definitions that we have seen. And maybe the fact he didn't need to define it points to out general use in this sense, but I have not sufficient knowledge of the other authors to say if it is this the case or not. But anyway, is quite closer to the later developments on probability, especially those in the scholastic tradition, in the great debate on probable opinions in the 16th and 17th century, then it could seem if we look just at these two definitions. And I think that's all.